Well, President Trump set his sights on health care and the Iran nuclear deal this week. Occidental College Professor Caroline Heldman joins us now. Good morning, Caroline.
Good morning, Amy.
Okay, so President Trump used an executive order to make changes to the Affordable Care Act. Now, isn't that the same thing he criticized President Obama for?
Well, sure, and every president does this, right? They criticize the previous president for engaging in tactics that they themselves find very handy, and executive orders are a great way to accomplish what Congress hasn't accomplished. And it's very clear that Donald Trump is not happy that Congress didn't repeal the Affordable Care Act because that was one of his big campaign promises. So now he's essentially gutting it from the inside out.
Wow. And what do these changes mean, considering many of the people that could be hurt by the changes are people who voted for President Trump?
Indeed. In fact, his voters are disproportionately affected by this. And what it means is he's cutting the subsidies that cover 95% of deductibles and copays. That means that we should expect to see the cost of health care go up about 20%. It will throw the healthcare market into chaos because there are quite a few companies that simply won't be able to stay in these exchanges given the new rates. So he is essentially, throwing healthcare into chaos, and I think he'll be blamed for it. He thinks the Democrats will be blamed for it, but if you look at who's actually making this decision and who is rejecting a bipartisan solution to address it, it's Donald Trump. So I worry that this is a very bad political decision for him, in addition to throwing millions of Americans off of healthcare potentially.
Yeah. Now, the president has decided not to recertify the Iran nuclear deal. He's sending it back to Congress. What does this really mean?
Well, every 90 days he has to certify the deal. It was passed in 2015, and it was an agreement between the United States, 5 other allied countries, and Iran that would contain their nuclear program until 2025. What this means, we're not entirely sure, because he wants to renegotiate it, but this isn't the way you renegotiate it, right? You actually go to these other countries, you say, look, here's a new deal. We don't want this one. Here's a new deal. He doesn't have a plan B, so we're not entirely sure what Congress will come up with. It destabilizes, once again, another nuclear country, and it's caused our allies to be very angry at us at this present hour.
Yeah, and will this decision make it difficult to negotiate treaties in the future?
I think it absolutely will for Donald Trump. I think that the international community is looking at him as being the source of kind of the unsteadiness here. And once again, this has a lot more to do with wanting to fulfill a campaign promise that was about making sure that something that Obama put in place wasn't in place. The unfortunate thing is this was actually working pretty well, and I understand Donald Trump wants to include something to prevent ICBMs, so these missiles that can go from one continent to another. That's a perfectly reasonable idea, but he needs to go through the proper channels because now he has destabilized yet another nuclear country.
And I want to ask you before we let you go about John Kelly speaking.
John Kelly, so he doesn't have a good poker face, right? This is a man who's kind of putting his hands up or looking quite glum when Donald Trump says controversial things that he knows are going to make the evening news. And there were rumors that he was going to be replaced, but he came out and said, nope, unless something changes, I won't be. I think about Scaramucci being the last person who said, I won't be fired. And, we've seen a lot of turmoil, so about 15 people have been fired or left Donald Trump's inner circle. John Kelly has been a bit of a stabilizing force, so I think it would be very wise for Donald Trump to keep him in that position as long as possible.
Yeah. All right. Caroline Heldman from Occidental College, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Always appreciate the insight.
Thanks, Amy.
Well,